The alarm screamed through the cargo ship Horizon's Edge as Captain Lisa Morgan rushed onto the bridge. Her boots hit the metal floor hard and she grabbed the rail to steady herself. The ship shook again and red warning lights flashed across every screen. Report, she said, her voice calm despite the chaos. Commander Jake Peterson looked up from his console, his face tight with worry. Captain, we're picking up a distress signal 2 million km ahead. It's an alien vessel, Veltron, based on the signature. They're under heavy attack. Lisa moved to the main screen and watched the sensor data scroll past. The Velrons were a warrior species, proud and powerful. They controlled 3-star systems and had one of the strongest military forces in the galaxy. If someone was attacking them, it had to be serious. Who's attacking? She asked. Crash, Jake said quietly. 5 warships. The Veltron vessel is badly damaged. Their shields are almost gone. Lisa felt her stomach tighten. The crash were bad news. They were an insectoid race that killed first and never asked questions. They'd been pushing into Council space for months, and every encounter ended blood. Dr. Amy Collins stepped onto the bridge, her medical bag already in hand. She was a small woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Are we helping them? She asked. Lisa looked at her crew. The Horizon's Edge wasn't a warship. They hauled cargo between human colonies. They had some shields and a few defensive weapons, but nothing that could stand up to a real fight. Going in would be dangerous, maybe even suicidal. But there were people dying out there. Yes, Lisa said, we're helping. Jake, get us there as fast as possible. Amy, prepare the medical bay for casualties. Tell engineering we'll need everything the engines can give us. Jake started working his console. Captain, we're a cargo ship. We can't fight 5 crash warships. We're not going to fight them, Lisa said. We're going to distract them long enough to get survivors off that ship, then we run like hell. The Horizon's Edge turned and accelerated, its engines burning bright in the darkness of space. Through the viewscreen, Lisa could see the battle ahead. The Veltron ship was twice the size of her vessel, but it was torn apart, bleeding atmosphere and fire into space. The crash ship circled it like sharks, firing plasma weapons that lit up the void. Hail them, Lisa ordered. Both sides. Jake worked quickly. Crash aren't responding. The Velrons are. Captain, they're telling us to stay away. They say this isn't our fight. Lisa smiled grimly. That sounded like the Velrons, too proud to ask for help. Even when they were dying, tell them we're coming anyway. Tell them to get their survivors to the port docking bay. The cargo ship dove into the battle zone, and immediately the crash noticed 2 of their warships broke off from the dying Veltron vessel and turned toward the Horizon's Edge. Their weapons glowed hot, preparing to fire. Shields up, Lisa commanded. Evasive pattern Delta, make us hard to hit. The ship twisted and turned through space as plasma bolts streaked. One hit their shields and the whole vessel shuddered. Lights flickered on the bridge. Another hit and another. The shields were holding, but not for long. How long until we reach them? Lisa asked. 30 seconds, Jake said. Through gritted teeth, shield at 60%, firing our weapons, Lisa said. Aim for their sensors, not their holes. I just want to annoy them. The Horizon's Edge fired its small defensive lasers. The shots weren't powerful enough to hurt the crash ships, but they hit their targeting systems and sensor arrays. It was like throwing stones at a bear, but it worked. The crash got angry and focused all their attention on the human ship. Docking in 10 seconds, Jake called out, shields at 40%. The Horizon's Edge slammed into the docking port of the dying Veltron ship. Metal screamed as the airlock connected. Lisa ran from the bridge toward the docking bay, Amy right behind her. The airlock door opened and smoke poured out. Through it came Thurans. They were tall, almost 8 ft with gray skin and 4 arms. Their armor was scorched and broken. Some were carried by others, bleeding purple blood across the floor. Get them to medical, Amy shouted, already scanning the first injured warrior with her medical device. Lisa counted quickly. 1, 16, 17 survivors, and one more figure stepping through the smoke. This one was different. He wore robes instead of armor, and his bearing spoke of authority despite his injuries. I am Ambassador Kaelvix, the Veltron said, his voice deep and formal. You have interfered in a matter of honor. I've saved your life, Lisa corrected him. You can be angry about it later. Right now, we need to go. She ran back to the bridge. Behind her, she heard Amy directing the Veltron survivors to medical bay. The ship shook hard as another plasma bolt hit their shields. Shields at 15%, Jake reported as Lisa dropped into her captain's chair. We need to leave now. Disconnect and get us out of here, Lisa ordered. Maximum speed. The Horizon Edge pulled away from the Veltron ship. Just as it exploded, the blast wave hit them hard, sending everyone sprawling. Alarm screamed. The lights went out, then flickered back on with emergency power. Go, 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 Lisa shouted. The cargo ship ran, its engines burning hot. The crash ships followed for a while, firing, but the Horizon's Edge was faster. They also seemed satisfied with destroying the Velron vessel. After a few minutes, the crash broke off pursuit and disappeared back into deep space. Lisa sat in her chair, breathing hard. Her hands were shaking, so she gripped the armrests to steady them. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. Ambassador Kaelvix came onto the bridge. His robes were torn and purple blood stained his shoulder, but he stood tall and proud. He looked at Lisa with eyes that were hard to read. You have saved my life and the lives of my crew, he said. Formally, the Velron Collective now owes humanity a debt. This is uncomfortable for us. We are not accustomed to owing anyone anything, especially not a species as young as yours. Lisa stood and faced him. She was barely half his height, but she met his gaze without fear. Kaelvix stared at her for a long moment. Nevertheless, the debt exists. We will repay it quickly so that this matter can be resolved and forgotten. He turned and left the bridge. Amy appeared in the door, watching him go. Friendly guy, she said dryly. They're warriors, Lisa said. Proud ones. I don't think they like being rescued by a cargo ship from a species they probably think is weak. Are we weak? Jake asked. Lisa looked at the view screen at the stars beyond. No, she said, we're just different. And maybe that's going to matter someday. She didn't know how right she was. 3 months had passed since the rescue, and the whole galaxy was talking about it, not because it was heroic, but because it was strange. A human cargo ship had saved a Veltron diplomatic vessel, and now the proud warrior species owed a debt to one of the youngest species in the Galactic Council. Admiral Carl Hughes stood on the observation deck of Earth's main Orbital station watching the stars. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He'd spent 40 years in space, and he'd learned that the galaxy was more complicated than most people realized. His assistant brought him a data pad. The Velron response just came through. Sir Carl read it carefully. The Velrons were offering a trade agreement. They would give humanity mining rights to an asteroid belt near human space. The terms were fair, barely. It was the minimum they could offer without losing face. They're paying back the debt, his assistant said. They're trying to erase it. Carl corrected. The Vethrins don't like owing anyone anything. This is them trying to settle the score as quickly and cheaply as possible. Are we going to accept? Carl smiled. Yes, and we're going to thank them for their generosity. On Earth, Senator Patricia Lane sat in her office, preparing for the Galactic Council meeting. She was a sharp woman in her 50s with dark skin and intelligent eyes. She'd been Earth's representative to the Council for 5 years, and she'd learned how the game was played. Her aide looked worried. Senator, the Veltron offer is insulting. We saved their ambassador and 17 of their people. They're offering us rocks in space. The Zenturi are already saying we should demand more. Patricia looked at the young man and smiled. The Zenturi think everything is about profit. They don't understand that we have a different goal, which is trust. Patricia said simply, we want the galaxy to trust us. We want them to know that when humans help, we're not looking for payment. We're looking for friends. The age shook his head. The other species will think we're weak. They'll think we're easy to take advantage of. I'll let them think that, Patricia said. For now, the Galactic Council met on a massive station that orbited a neutron star. Thousands of species sent representatives there, but only the major powers had real voting authority. The Velrons were one of those powers. So were the Zenturi, a species of merchants who controlled most of the galaxy's trade. Humanity was still a minor member, new and largely ignored. Patricia sat in Earth's small delegation area and watched as Ambassador Kale Vic stood to speak. The Veltron was fully healed now, his armor polished and perfect. He looked every bit the proud warrior diplomat. The Velron Collective acknowledges the debt owed to humanity. He said formally, we have offered fair compensation, which has been accepted. The matter is now closed. Around the chamber, other delegates whispered to each other. The Zenturi delegate, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish, made a sound that translated as laughter. The humans are either very wise or very foolish, the Zenturi said. Publicly, they had leverage and chose not to use it. Curious, Patricia stood. Humanity is honored by the Velron offer. We look forward to working with all Council species in the spirit of cooperation and mutual benefit. She sat down in the Council, moved on to other business, but she noticed that several delegates were looking at her with new interest, some with confusion, others with calculation. After the meeting, Admiral Hughes appeared on her communication screen from Earth orbit. Exactly as planned, Patricia said. They think we're naive. Good, Carl said. Let's keep it that way while we do the real work. The real work started quietly. Earth's government began an initiative that most people didn't notice at first. They started sharing information with any species that wanted it. Medical techniques for treating radiation exposure, engineering designs for better life support systems, agricultural methods, for growing food in harsh environments, disaster response protocols, search and rescue procedures, all of it was free. No payment required. No strings attached, the Zenchuri thought. It was stupid. Why give away valuable information? Their trade council asked, the Velrons ignored it. They had their own methods and didn't need human help, but smaller species noticed, the planaria farming, species that struggled with crop failures took the agricultural data. Gratefully, the Cortax who worked in dangerous mining operations implemented the safety protocols and saved dozens of lives. The Yendari colony on a hostile Isu world used the disaster response plans when a storm hit and managed to save everyone. Lieutenant Vexner was a young Velt Thron officer who had been among those rescued from the dying ship. He was curious about humans in a way that made his superiors uncomfortable. While others tried to forget the embarrassing rescue, Vex as Nor studied the species that had saved him. He accessed Earth's historical databases, which humans made freely available to all council species. What he found fascinated him. Humans had a long history of keeping track of favors and debts, but not in the way the Veltrans understood. They remembered who helped them, sometimes for generations. They had sayings about it. We never forget a kindness. What goes around comes around. Today you, tomorrow me. But they also remembered betrayal throughout their history. Humans had long memories for those who broke trust. They could be patient, waiting years or even decades to respond to a wrong, but they always responded. Vexner wrote a report and sent it to Ambassador Kale Vix. The ambassador read it in his private quarters on the Velron home world. Report concluded with a warning: humans may appear to accept the minimal payment without complaint, but this does not mean they have forgotten. Their species has a pattern of building long-term relationships based on reciprocal behavior. We should be cautious about how we treat them. Kale Vix deleted the report. Young lieutenant was overthinking things. Humans were soft. They'd accepted the payment because they were too weak to demand more. The debt was paid. The matter was closed, but late. That night Kale Vix stood in his meditation chamber and thought about Captain Lisa Morgan. He remembered her face when she told him they didn't help for payment. He remembered how her small cargo ship had charged into battle without hesitation, risking everything for strangers. The Velrons valued honor and courage above all else. He had seen both in that human captain, yet his people had treated her rescue as an embarrassment to be quickly forgotten. Was that honorable? He pushed the thought away. The Velron way was the right way. They were warriors. They didn't need to learn lessons from a species that was barely out of its own solar system a century ago. Back on Earth, Senator Patricia Lane met with Admiral Hughes in a secure conference room. The seeds are planted, she said. We've helped 24 minor species in the past 3 months. We've asked for nothing in return, and the major powers, Carl asked, still think we're naive. Patricia said, which is perfect. Let them underestimate us while we build relationships with everyone else. It's a long game, Carl said. Patricia smiled. Humanity is good at long games. We've been playing them for thousands of years. She pulled up a star map on the display. It showed human space and the surrounding sectors. Right now we're small and weak. But in 10 years, 20, if we can build trust with enough species, if we can show them that we're reliable and generous, we won't need to be the strongest military power. We'll have something better, friends. Carl said. Exactly, Patricia agreed, and when trouble comes, and it always does, friends matter more than weapons. Neither of them knew how soon trouble would come or how much their strategy would matter, but the pieces were already moving across the board, and humanity was playing a game that none of the other species even realized had started. 1 year after the rescue, Commander Danny Walsh guided his exploration ship Pioneer through an asteroid field. He was a relaxed man in his 30s with an easy smile and sharp instincts. His crew liked him because he treated everyone fairly and never asked them to do something he wouldn't do himself. Commander were picking up a distress signal. His communications officer called out, "It's coming from inside the asteroid field." Danny straightened in his chair. The Century were the galaxy's merchants, always making deals and counting profits. What were they doing out here? Can you make out what they're saying? He asked. Mining accident, sir. They're trapped. Requesting immediate assistance. Danny didn't hesitate. Plot a course. Let's go get them. Number. His second officer looked worried. Sir, the Century have their own rescue ships. Shouldn't we contact them first? By the time their ships get here, those miners might be dead. Danny said. We're closer. We go now. The Pioneer navigated carefully through the tumbling rocks. Dr. Sophie Grant, the ship's xenoanthropologist, came to the bridge. She was a woman, her 40s, who studied alien cultures. She'd been reviewing Century psychology, trying to understand how they thought. The Century don't like accepting charity, she warned Danny. They'll want to pay us, then they can pay us. Danny said, right now, I just want to make sure they don't die. They found the mining station buried under a collapsed asteroid. 3 dozen Century workers were trapped inside, their air running out. The Pioneer's crew worked for 6 hours, cutting through rock and metal, reinforcing tunnels, and finally pulling out every single miner. The Century supervisor approached Danny afterward. The alien's tentacles waved in what Sophie said was a gesture of gratitude. How much do we owe you? The supervisor asked immediately. Danny shrugged. You don't owe us anything. We were in the area. We helped, that's all. Supervisor's tentacles went still. Everything has a price. What do you want? I want you and your people to get home safely. Danny said. That's payment enough. The Century looked confused. But they left. Sophie watched them go and shook her head. They don't understand us at all. Good, Danny said. Let them be confused. Across the galaxy, similar events were happening. A human medical team helped the Plenari deal with a plague outbreak, asking for nothing in return. Human engineers assisted the Cortax when their main power station failed, refusing payment. Human diplomats mediated a border dispute between 2 minor species, and both sides were shocked when the humans didn't demand territory as a reward for their help. The Galactic Council started to notice a pattern in the council chambers. The Century delegate brought it up during a session. The humans are behaving oddly. They help, but they don't ask for anything. Either they're planning something or they're fools. The Veltron representative, a warrior named Tavrex, who had replaced Kaelvix, spoke up. Perhaps they're simply soft. Their species values compassion over strength. It makes them weak. But not everyone. Agreed a delegate from the hive. Collective, a species offered minds. Offered a different view, we have. Analyzed human behavior patterns across their history. They're not weak, they're patient, they think in terms of generations, not years. We should be careful about dismissing them. Crease. Peter, the council debated, but reached no conclusion. Humanity remained a puzzle. Lieutenant Vexner, now promoted to captain, continued his research. He'd become something of an expert on human culture, which made him strange among the Velrons. Warriors weren't supposed to care about alien psychology. They were supposed to care about honor and victory, but Vexner had noticed something that bothered him. He pulled up case after case from human history. Nation that helped another during a disaster and was remembered as a friend for centuries, a person who betrayed trust and was never forgiven. Communities that worked together and prospered. Communities that turned on each other and collapsed. Humans kept score. They just didn't collect payment immediately. He requested a meeting with Ambassador Kale Vix, who was visiting the Velron military headquarters. The old diplomat agreed to see him, though he looked annoyed. You wanted to speak with me? Kalevix asked. I wanted to share my research on humanity, Vexer said. He brought up his data on a display screen. I've been studying them since they saved us. I think we've misunderstood what they're doing. They accepted our payment, Kalevix said. The debt is settled, is it? Vexer asked. Look at this data. Every species that humans have helped in the past year, they've maintained contact with. They check in on the Plenari colonies. They trade messages with the Cortex miners. They've built relationships. They've built relationships, so Kalevix said. So they're building a network, Vexner explained. Not a military alliance, not a trade partnership, something else, a web of species that owe them goodwill. And humans have a saying, what goes around comes around. Kalevix stared at the data. You think they're going to call in these debts someday? I think they're investing, Vexer said, and I think when they need help, all these species are going to remember who was there for them. The ambassador was quiet for a long time. Finally he said, that's a very long game to play. It might take decades to pay off. Humans live a 100 red years on average, Vexner said, and their governments and institutions last for centuries. They think long-term in ways we don't. Kykes dismissed him, but the conversation stayed in his mind. He found himself thinking about Captain Lisa Morgan again, about the way she'd risked her ship without hesitation, about the way she'd said they didn't help for payment. What if the young captain was right? What if humans really were playing a different game entirely? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. The crash had been quiet for months, gathering their forces in the dark spaces between stars. They were an insectoid species driven by a hive mind that valued only expansion and consumption. They didn't negotiate, they didn't trade. Their fleet emerged from dark space and struck at 3 different locations simultaneously. A Cortex mining colony was destroyed in minutes. A Plenari agricultural world was invaded, its people slaughtered. Zenturi trade station was reduced to debris. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. Panic filled the chamber. The crash fleet was massive, bigger than anyone had expected, and they were moving fast, hitting multiple targets across council space. We need a coordinated defense, the council speaker said, but even as he spoke, everyone knew it was impossible. The major powers didn't trust each other enough to combine their forces. The Velans wanted to defend their honor alone. The Zenchuri wanted to protect their trade routes. The other species were scrambling to defend their own territories. Senator Patricia Lane stood. Earth offers its full support to any defensive efforts. We'll contribute whatever forces we can. Earth. Your forces are small, the Veltran representative said dismissively. What good will they do? Every ship helps, Patricia said quietly, and we remember our friends in the Zenchuri delegation area. Their representatives' tentacles waved thoughtfully. The Zenchuri had excellent memories when it came to debts and favors. Humans had saved their miners for free. Was that debt being called in now? In the plenary section, their delegates whispered to each other. Humans had helped fight their plague. Now the plenary home world was under threat. Would the humans help again? All across the council, delegates from minor species looked at each other and thought the same thing. Humanity had been there. When they needed help, they'd asked for nothing, they just helped. What kind of species did that? And more importantly, what kind of species would they be if they didn't return that kindness now? The council meeting ended in chaos, with each species scrambling to defend their own space, but something was stirring beneath the surface, a pattern that would soon become clear. On Earth, Admiral Carl Hughes received the emergency broadcast. He stood in the command center, surrounded by displays showing the crash. Invasion routes. Deploy the fleet, he ordered. All available ships and send them where they're needed most. Where's that, sir? His aide asked. Carl pulled up a list on his screen. It showed every species humanity had helped in the past year, 37 in total. All of them were now in the path of the crash invasion. Everywhere we made friends, he said. It's time to show them what friendship means. 2 months into the crash invasion, the galaxy was burning. The insectoid swarm had hit 15 different systems, overwhelming local defenses. With sheer numbers, the Galactic Council was fracturing as each species focused on protecting their own territory. General Frank Morris stood in Earth's military command center, coordinating the largest deployment in human history. He was a broad-shouldered man with white hair and a scarred face from an old accident. He'd fought in every major human conflict for the past 30 years, and he'd never seen anything like this. Status report, he ordered. His tactical officer pulled up a display showing human fleet positions across the galaxy. We've deployed 90% of our military vessels. General, they're spread across 42 different locations. That's insane. Another officer muttered. We're leaving Earth almost defenseless. Frank looked at the man. The crash aren't attacking Earth, not yet. They're hitting our friends, and we don't abandon our friends. On the other side of the galaxy, Captain Lisa Morgan commanded the destroyer Valiant. She'd been promoted twice since the rescue of Ambassador K.L. Vix, and now she led a small task force of human ships. Her current position was in orbit above a Veltran colony world that the Kresh were about to attack. The planet held 3 million Veltran civilians and had minimal defenses. Her first officer looked nervous. Captain, the Velron fleet is 3 days away. We're the only ones here. When the crash arrive, we won't last long, Lisa Checked her tactical display, 5 crash. Warships were headed straight for the planet. Her task force had 3 ships. Total, we don't need to last long, she said. We just need to slow them down until the VTHRons arrive, and we need to protect the evacuation shuttles, the Veltrans. Didn't ask for our help, her first officer said quietly. Lisa smiled. They didn't ask us to save their ambassador. Either we did it anyway, that's what friends do. The crash ships arrived like locusts, their organic-looking vessels pulsing. With weapons, Lisa's task force moved to intercept their human ships, small and fast compared to the enemy's bulk. The battle was brutal. The Valiant took hit after hit, shields failing, hull breaching in 3 places, but they held the line. Below on the planet's surface, civilians evacuated to underground shelters while their few defense platforms fired upward. Lisa's ship was dying, she knew it, but the Veltron fleet was only 2 hours away now. They just had to hold on. Direct hit to engineering, her tactical officer shouted. We've lost main power. Switch to backup, Lisa ordered. Down on the planet, Ambassador Kale Vix watched the battle from a command bunker. He'd been visiting the colony when the attack began. Now he stood frozen, watching the human ships sacrifice themselves to protect Velron. Civilians, why are they here? A young Veltran officer asked. We paid our debt. We owe them nothing. Kale Vix thought about Captain Morgan, about the way she'd looked at him when she said they didn't help for payment. He finally understood. They're not here because we owe them, he said quietly. They're here because they consider us friends, and we treated them with coldness and dismissed their sacrifice. Shame burned in his chest. It was a feeling Velrons rarely experienced, but he felt it now. The Velron fleet arrived and smashed into the crushed ships. The battle turned quickly. The crash retreated, leaving the system. The colony was saved. Kyle Vix went up to the Valiant on a medical shuttle. The human ship was barely functional, held together by emergency repairs. He found Captain Morgan on the bridge, her uniform torn and bloody. You came, he said simply. Of course. We came, Lisa replied. You needed help. We paid our debt, Kale Vix said. You owed us nothing. Lisa looked at him with tired eyes. This isn't about debts, Ambassador. It never was. You were there when we needed you, that day. We rescued you. Maybe you didn't ask for help today, but we were there anyway. That's what friends do for each other. Kale Vix felt something shift in his understanding. All his life he'd thought of debts as transactions to be settled and forgotten, but humans saw them differently. To them, helping someone created a bond, not an obligation. And bonds lasted. I need to speak with my government, he said. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. Human ships appeared at Zenturi trade stations that were under attack. They reinforced Plenari agricultural worlds. They defended Cortex mining facilities. Every single species that humanity had helped in the past year suddenly found human warships in their space, fighting alongside them. The Zenturi Trade Council held an emergency meeting. Their chief negotiator, who dismissed humans as naive just months before, looked at the tactical reports. The humans saved our Epsilon mining station, he said. They lost 2 ships doing it. Why? We already paid them for the last rescue. They owed us nothing. One another council member spoke up. I've been reviewing human trade patterns. They Don't think like we do when they help someone. They're not making a transaction, they're making an investment in the relationship itself. That's foolish, someone argued. Relationships don't have measurable value, don't they? The chief negotiator asked. He pulled up a display showing Zenturi assets across the galaxy. Look at our losses from the crash attacks. Now look at the assets that humans helped defend. They saved us billions in resources and hundreds of lives. What's the value of that? End quote. The council was quiet. I think the chief negotiator said slowly, we've been calculating the wrong numbers. We thought humans were weak because they didn't demand payment, but maybe they were getting something more valuable than money. What? Someone asked. Trust, he said. Goodwill, allies who actually want to help us, not because they're paid to, but because they consider us friends. In the plenary home world, their council of elders met. In their traditional circle, the plenary were a gentle species, farmers and philosophers who avoided conflict when possible. The humans have deployed ships to defend 7 of our colonies. The eldest spoke. They're asking for no payment, no trade concessions, nothing. They're just here fighting beside us. Why? A younger elder asked. Because we needed help, another answered. Just like we needed help with the plague and they gave it freely. They remember kindness and they return it. The plenary looked at each other. They had a saying in their culture: a seed given freely grows into a forest. Perhaps the humans understood this better than anyone. Back on Earth, Senator Patricia Lane watched the tactical displays with Admiral Hughes. Their fleets were scattered across the galaxy, stretched thin, fighting on dozens of fronts. We're taking heavy casualties, Carl said quietly. 3 ships lost, 9 badly damaged, and the Galactic Council still hasn't organized a coordinated defense. And ours they will, Patricia said with confidence. We just need to give them time to realize what we've been showing them all along, which is that we're trustworthy. She said that when we say we'll help, we actually help, that we don't abandon our friends when things get hard. The council species have been dealing with each other for so long they've forgotten what it's like to work with someone who isn't trying to gain advantage. Carl looked at her. You really think this will work? It's already working, Patricia said. She pulled up a new set of data. Look at the communications we're intercepting. The Zenturi are talking about what we've done for them. The plenary are discussing our aid. The Velrons are, and this is the important part, questioning their own behavior toward us. The Vel, Carl said with surprise. Patricia smiled. Ambassador Kaelvix just sent a message to his government. He's recommending a complete reassessment of their relationship with humanity. He called our intervention a display of true honor coming from a Veltron. That's huge, Carl said. It's everything. Patricia agreed, because once the Veltrans commit to something, they commit fully. We saved them once and they tried to pay it off quickly. We saved them again without being asked. And now they're starting to understand what we've been trying to show them. That we're friends worth having, Carl said. Exactly, Patricia said, and friends don't let friends fight alone. 4 months into the war, something remarkable began to happen. The Galactic Council chamber, which had been filled with chaos and fear, slowly started to change. Council Speaker Tavern called an emergency session. He was an elderly being from a species that had helped Found the council 3,000 years ago. He'd seen wars before, but never anything like this. The crash advance has slowed, he announced, for the first time since the invasion began. They're not gaining ground. In fact, in some sectors, they're retreating around the chamber. Delegates looked at each other in surprise. How was this possible? The Crush had superior numbers and had been winning every major battle. The Velron representative, now Ambassador Kael'vix himself, who'd been called back to council duty, stood to speak. His voice was different from before, less cold and formal. The tide has turned because we're finally fighting together, he said, and we have humanity to thank for showing us how. He brought up tactical displays showing recent battles. 3 days ago, the crash attacked a Plenari colony. World human ships were already there, defending it. The Plenari asked us for help. Normally, we Velrons would have debated whether it was worth defending someone else's territory, but the humans were already there, bleeding for the Plenari. How could we do less? He changed the display. We sent ships, and when we arrived, we found not just humans and Plenary, but also Zenchuri vessels providing support and logistics. Cortex had sent their mining ships equipped with weapons. Even the Yandari, who rarely leave their ice world, sent what they could. Kael'vix looked around the chamber. We won that battle not because any one species was strong enough, but because we fought as one, and we fought as one because the humans had already shown us it was possible. Senator Patricia Lane stood in Earth's delegation area. Ambassador Kael'vix honors us too much. We simply did what felt right. We helped those who needed help. We protected those who needed protection. We didn't think about what we'd get in return. The Zenchuri delegates' tentacles waved in what Sophie Grant, watching from the gallery, recognized as a gesture of respect. Senator Lane, my people have spent centuries calculating the value of everything. We thought we understood trade and debts, but you humans showed us something we'd forgotten. Trust has value, friendship has value, and sometimes the best investment is the one you make without expecting immediate return. The delegate brought up financial data. Since the war began, species that humans helped have been coordinating with each other in unprecedented ways. The Plenari are feeding refugees from attacked worlds. The Cortex are sharing their mining resources. The Zenchuri, my own people, are moving supplies without profit. Do you know why? He paused for effect. Because the humans showed us it was possible. They helped us without asking for payment, and it made us want to be better. It made us want to be worthy of that trust. Around the chamber, other delegates began to stand. Species after species told similar stories. Humans had helped them, asked for nothing, and in doing so had created bonds that were now holding the council together during its darkest hour. Small voice spoke from one of the minor delegation areas. It was a Hinari, species of bird-like beings that barely had space travel. We have little to contribute to this war. We have no mighty fleets or powerful weapons, but humans taught us that even small help matters. We're sending our medical ships to treat the wounded. It's all we can do, but we do it because humans showed us that kindness is never wasted. Patricia felt tears in her eyes. This was what she and Carl and all of Earth's government had hoped for, not gratitude or payment, but understanding. The galaxy was finally learning what humanity had known for a Long time, people working together were stronger than people working alone. Captain Vexner of the Veltron military presented a tactical analysis to the council. The Kresh are powerful, but they have a weakness. They don't understand cooperation. Their hive mind makes them think as one, which makes them predictable. They expect us to fight as separate species, protecting separate interests. They didn't expect us to fight as one united force. He brought up projections. If we maintain our current level of coordination, we can push them back. Within 3 months, we can win this war. But only if we continue to work together. Why? The council voted unanimously to create a joint military command. For the first time in its history, species from across the galaxy would fight under a single coordinated strategy. And when they voted for who should lead this command, they chose a human. General Frank Morris accepted the position with humility. I'm honored by your trust. Let's end this war and show the Kresh that the galaxy stands united. The final battles were fierce. The Kresh threw everything they had at the council forces, but it wasn't enough. Species that had barely spoken to each other before were now coordinating complex military maneuvers. The Velrons provided the heavy assault ships. The Zenturi managed logistics and supply lines with perfect efficiency. The Plenari fed entire armies. The Cortex mined resources and built fortifications, and dozens of smaller species contributed what they could, all of it adding up to something greater than any one species could achieve alone. Captain Lisa Morgan led a joint task force in the final battle for a key crash staging area. Her fleet included warriors, Zenturi support ships, and vessels from a dozen other species. They fought not as separate units, but as one coordinated force. When the battle was won and the Crash were finally retreating back to their own space, Kale Vic sent a message to Lisa's ship. Captain Morgan, I wanted to thank you personally, not just for this battle, but for everything. You saved my life 2 years ago, and I treated it as an embarrassment. I offered you the minimum payment possible, hoping to erase the debt quickly. I was wrong. Lisa smiled as she read the message. You don't owe me anything, Ambassador. That's what you said before, Kalvix replied, and I didn't understand. But now I do. You didn't want payment. You wanted friends, and by refusing to collect the debt, by continuing to help us and everyone else without asking for return, you gave us something far more valuable. What's that? Lisa asked. In example, Kavik said, you showed us what we could be, what the galaxy could be. Place where species help each other. Not because they're forced to or paid to, but because it's the right thing to do. 6 months after the war ended, the Galactic Council held a ceremony on the Central Station. Species from across the galaxy attended, not just the major powers but the minor ones too. Everyone who had fought, everyone who had helped, everyone who had contributed. Admiral Carl Hughes stood with Senator Patricia Lane watching the proceedings. We lost a lot of ships in that war, he said quietly. A lot of good people. I know, Patricia said, but look at what we gained. She gestured to the chamber below. Delegates from dozens of species were talking, laughing, sharing stories. The Velrons were coordinating joint training exercises with the Plenari. The Zenturi were discussing fair trade agreements instead of exploitative ones. Species that had been enemies for centuries were finding common ground. We changed the galaxy, Patricia said. Not by being the strongest or the richest, but by being the kind of people others wanted to be friends with. The council speaker called for attention. Today, we honor all those who fought to defend our freedom, but there is one species we must acknowledge specially. Humanity joined our council only a few years ago. They were small, weak by our standards, with limited resources. Yet when the crash invaded, they deployed everything they had to defend. Species across the galaxy, many of those species had given them nothing in return. For previous help, many had dismissed them as naive or foolish. He paused, but humanity taught us something crucial. They taught us that strength isn't just about weapons or numbers. True strength comes from trust, from friendship, from being willing to help others, even when there's no guarantee of return. They paid back every debt we owed them in ways we never expected, by showing us how to be better. The chamber erupted in applause. Patricia felt tears running down her face. Carl put a hand on her shoulder. "We did it," he said. "We actually did it, on Earth, in a small apartment in New York." An old woman watched the ceremony on her screen. Her name was Lisa Morgan, now retired after 40 years of service. She'd started as the captain of a cargo ship and ended as an admiral, but the moment she was proudest of was still that day. She decided to help a dying Velrun vessel. Without hesitation, her grandson sat beside her. He was young, just 10 years old, and he loved stories about space. "Grandma, why did you help them?" he asked. "The Velruns, I mean, when you first saved them." Lisa smiled and ruffled his hair. "Because they needed help and we could provide it. That's all the reason anyone ever needs." "But you didn't know they'd become friends," the boy said. "You didn't know it would change the galaxy." "No," Lisa agreed. "We didn't know, and that's the point. You don't help people because you expect something back. You help them because it's right, and sometimes, if you're very lucky, that kindness comes back to you in ways you never imagined." She looked at the screen, at the galaxy, united in ways it had never been before. "We paid back every debt we owed," she said softly. "Not in money or trade agreements, but in trust and friendship. And it turns out that's worth more than all the asteroids in space." Her grandson thought about that. "I want to be like you when I grow up," he said. "I want to help people." Lisa hugged him. "Then you will be, because that's what humans do. We remember kindness, we return it, and we never forget that we're all in this together." Outside her window, the sun was setting on Earth, but across the galaxy a new dawn was rising. A galaxy where species worked together, trusted each other, and helped each other, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. A galaxy that humanity had helped create, not through force or manipulation, but through simple, consistent kindness, and that, Lisa thought, was the best payment of